And it occurred to me that as a certified financial planner and their wealth advisor, we had done everything we were supposed to help them build a good investment strategy and an asset allocation and build more wealth than they ever thought they were going to have. And it ended up not making any difference to them, because by the time they got to the point where we asked the question, their health had kept them from being able to use this money. Now, they eventually made some charitable gifts and made some gifts to their kids and grandkids. But I kind of went, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We are going to look at money as a means, not an end. It's not like whoever dies with the most wins, right? And we're going to look at this and go, how can we help clients use these resources to accomplish what's most important in life?
Welcome to the Bricks and Banks podcast, where real estate meets real wealth. Whether you're building from the ground up or stacking your paper to the ceiling, Steph breaks down property power plays and money moves you can act on. From first-time buyers to seasoned investors, this podcast is your blueprint for financial freedom through real estate, business, and investment. Subscribe now. It's time to build your future. This is Bricks and Banks with Steph.
Before we dive into the conversation, I want to let you know that this episode is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. You know what's interesting? We all have these patterns in our lives. The ways we react when we are stressed out, hurt, or disappointed. Maybe shutting people out or walking yourself into exhaustion. Or that voice in your head that says you're not good enough. For me, it's shutting people out. And here is the thing. We know that these patterns aren't helping us. We can see them clearly, but breaking them, that's a completely different story. I used to think I could just power through on my own, that time will heal everything, or I just needed to be stronger. But the truth is, some cycles are nearly impossible to break on your own. Not because you're weak, but because you're so close to see the full picture. That's why having outside support, real professional support, becomes a game changer. When you have someone who is trained to help you understand why these patterns exist and give you actual tools to help change them, everything shifts. You're not just surviving anymore, you're actually on your path to healing. That's why I'm partnering with BetterHelp today. BetterHelp is on a mission to make starting therapy easier. They will connect you with a credentialed therapist who is trained to listen to you and give you helpful, unbiased advice, ensuring confidentiality throughout the process. You just get to fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist as soon as possible. And if that's not the right fit, don't fret. You can easily switch therapists at any time at no extra cost. To get started, head on to betterhelp.com/bricksandbanks. That is betterhelp.com/bricksandbanks to get 10% off your very first month of therapy. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description so you can get right on. Breaking the cycle starts with one step, and this could be yours. Going to therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. BetterHelp makes therapy simple with 10% off your first month of therapy to help you get started. So what are you waiting for? Remember, you don't have to do this alone. A problem shared is a problem half solved. Hey everyone, welcome to another amazing episode of the Bricks and Banks podcast. I know most people think wealth is just numbers in a bank account, but real wealth is clarity, it's confidence, and having a plan that actually works. Today on the Bricks and Banks podcast, I'm joined by someone who has spent over 3 decades helping individuals and families stop guessing and start building with purpose. He's the senior wealth manager and the CEO of Impel Wealth Management. He's a certified financial planner, an AIF professional, and the author of the book Poponomics. It's a book that connects money with music, culture, and real life in a way that actually makes sense. Jesse Hurst has been named one of Ohio's best in-state wealth advisors, and he's known for his philosophy that hope is not a strategy. In this episode, we break down retirement psychology, wealth mindsets, decision-making, and what it really takes to build a meaningful financial future. Jesse, you're so likable, and it's amazing to have you on my show today. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. I mean, you're known for the book Poponomics. How did you get into writing that book? I know you just wanted to dilute all your experience in the financial world, but you took it up a notch with infusing music and pop culture in it. So what was this trigger that made you to write Poponomics?
Okay, so I hope this makes sense because I'm quite a bit older than you. So
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I've been writing blog posts probably for about 14, 15 years, right? And I was a partner in a firm that was formed in 1997. And when that firm was formed, my two partners were 48 and 44. I was 31. I was the young kid at the time with that firm. So when we started writing blog posts in 2010, we took turns, so I'd write one or two a month. And then by the time we got to 2017, my two oldest partners were now, 68, turning 69 and getting ready to retire. And so I formed Impel Wealth Management at that point in time. Well, as the sole owner and sole partner in the firm, right then I was writing all the blog posts. So I was writing like generally one a month. When COVID hit back in 2020 and you couldn't be face to face with clients, I started doubling down on that and writing 2 blog posts a week just to keep communication with clients because there was so much information floating around and so forth. And once in a while before that, I had used a classic rock song or a TV show or a movie to frame something. But in March of 2020, when COVID hit and the economy shut down here in the United States, the federal government passed something called the CARES Act, which was all the federal government stimulus and so forth. And the Federal Reserve Bank cut interest rates to 0 to try to stimulate and support the economy and keep things from falling off a cliff. And Jay Powell, who was the Federal Reserve Bank chairman, and Steve Mnuchin, who was the Treasury Secretary at the time, did a joint press conference, and they said, this is an unprecedented economic event. It's an unprecedented recession, and we are going to need to use unprecedented economic and financial tools to fight this. We're going to need to use unconventional financial weapons. And for whatever reason, and this is where I hope I don't lose you on this, there was a scene in the movie Animal House, right? Now, you got to remember, I'm 60 years old, right? Where the frat brothers said, they were going to try to get back at the dean who kicked them out of the college. And they said, now we could use conventional weapons, but that could take years and cost millions of lives. And so when I heard Steve Mnuchin, when I heard the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve Bank chairman say this, it sounded just like the guys from Animal House. So I wrote a blog post titled, the Federal Reserve and the federal government, compared to, Animal House. And so I compared them. And we got so much feedback. People thought it was funny. They read it. They shared it with friends. They thought it was.
Hey, everyone. All right, listen up. If you're a UK homeowner or landlord, you're going to want to hear this. I just partnered with Utility Warehouse. And honestly, I wish I knew this sooner. Here's the tea. Utility Warehouse is the only place where you can bundle your energy, mobile, and home insurance into one simple monthly bill. No more juggling 5 different logins. No more surprise hikes, no more bill headaches. But the best part, most people actually save money just by switching, like without doing anything fancy. Quick highlights: you can save up to £276 in a year and cash back every time you shop. That's about up to 10%. Up to £150 welcome credits. If you're stuck in a contract, they'll pay you up to £400 to help you switch. Winter bills are about to slap everyone, but not you, if you move smart. So here's what I'm doing. I'm offering a free utility consultation to show you exactly what you could save by switching to Utility Warehouse. Click the link in the description and see how much you can save. Let's put money in your pocket this winter. Don't sleep on this because your bills definitely wouldn't. Cheers.
Memorable. And then the second one was in the fall of that year, fall of 2020, I saw this report. So this is much more current example. The TV show Friends, you're familiar with it all, the US TV show Friends, right?
Yeah.
So I saw this report that said as of December 31st, 2019, the US economy was $21.7 trillion in size. By the time we got to June 30th of 2020, after 2 quarters of economic shutdowns because of COVID, the economy had shrunk from 21.7 trillion to 19.5 trillion. And I thought about it and I was like, that's interesting. That means that the COVID shutdowns have dug a $2.2 trillion hole in the U.S. economy.
Okay.
Well, there's a Friends episode where Monica and Joey and Chandler go to the beach, and Joey digs this big hole, and then
Oh,
the waves come in and fill it in, right? And
yeah.
so, and all the Friends episodes are titled The One Where, right? So I wrote a blog post titled The One Where Joey and the Economy Dug a Hole. And I talked about, just like the waves came in and filled in Joey's hole on the beach, the federal government came in and filled in a $2 trillion deficit with $6 trillion of stimulus and monetary surplus and so forth. And I'm like, what's going to happen when we take a $2 trillion hole and stuff $6 trillion of money in it? There's probably going to be some unintended consequences that come
True.
from that with things like inflation or whatever. But people love that. So it really kind of solidified that framing things around pop culture, TV shows, movies, music, whatever, make them relatable, fun, and things that people remember. Yeah. So when I was writing the book, I was encouraged to
Yeah.
write the book by a number of people. When
Okay.
I was actually, I'll never forget this. My son and daughter-in-law were over, and I was grilling outside for them, and I was trying to think about like what makes this book different or unique. And it's like, well, everything that I do, I frame economic investment and retirement planning
Okay.
theories or ideas using pop culture ideas. So I use pop culture ideas to frame economic and investment. I kind of went, oh, that's like Poponomics, and it just popped into my head. And that's where the
Oh,
idea for the book came from.
amazing story. And the reason I asked about the book is because that's the episode's title, Poponomics and
Yes.
Purpose, How Jesse Hurst Redefines Wealth, Retirement, and Financial Mindsets. I know you've spent over 3 decades in financial planning and you built Impel Wealth around meaningful conversations, like you just explained. So, what made you first realize that money conversations were not just about numbers, but about identity, fear, and life direction?
Yeah, I thought about this, and it was a great question,
Mm,
and it brought me back to a story I hadn't thought about in a while. But I was referred to this couple back in 1991. So I started doing this in 1987. In
okay.
1991, I was referred to this couple who, at the time, were 62 and 59 years old, and they invested $150,000 with me, which in 1991, when I was 26 years old, I couldn't believe anybody trusted me with $150,000 of their money, right? But over the next 8 or 9 years, we went through the dot-com run-up, the markets and the economy did pretty well. By the time we got to 2000, their $150,000 had grown to more than $400,000, which was more money than they ever thought they would have. And they were still living off their Social Security and pensions. And I remember sitting with them in 2000, and I asked them, okay, you've got this $400,000. It's more money than you ever thought you were going to have. You haven't spent any of it. What are you going to use this money for? How can we use this money to make a difference in your life? And by
Mm,
this point, they were 70 and 73. And I remember the wife looked at me and said, well, we've always wanted to take an Alaskan cruise, or we've thought about buying a new car. We thought about taking a trip to Israel to see the Holy Lands. And then
yeah.
she kind of put her head down and she said, but we'll never be able to do that because the husband had developed some health issues
Oh,
that would preclude them from being able to do that. And it occurred to me that as a certified financial planner and their wealth advisor, we had done everything we were supposed to help them build a good investment strategy and an asset allocation and
yeah.
build more wealth than they ever thought they were going to have. And it ended up not making any difference to them because by the
Yeah.
time they got to the point where we asked the question, their health had kept them from being able to use this money. Now, they eventually made some charitable gifts and made some gifts to their kids and grandkids. But I kind of went, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We are going to look at money as a means, not an end. It's not like whoever
Mm.
dies with the most wins, right? And we're going to look at this and go, how can we help clients use these resources to accomplish what's most important in life?
Okay, that's amazing. But let's take a trip back to memory lane to like learn your story. How was it for you growing up? Is this what you've always wanted to do, being a financial planner, or the you got the tug at some point in your journey through school?
Yeah, so I was always interested in money, finance, banking, investment stuff. I grew up in a pretty lower middle class, bordering on poor family. So like by the time I was 9 or 10 years old, if I
Mm.
wanted money to do anything, I was out raking leaves, mowing lawns, shoveling snow. I had my own newspaper route. And so I had to work and save money and so forth. So I learned early on about work and earning and saving money. So it was always an interest of mine. This is going to sound crazy, but there was a TV show on back in the 90s called Family Ties that
Okay.
Michael J. Fox was the star of. He was his TV character name was Alex P. Keaton, who was like this young high school college guy who was very fascinated with the stock market and investing. And I kind of said, oh, I get that, right? So I always wanted to do something along those lines.
Mm.
And so I worked my way through college. Part of the way I worked my first 2 years of college, I loaded and unloaded trucks to be able to pay for my next semester of school. But then I took a job at Huntington Bank and I spent my last 2 years of college working at a bank. And then I realized that when I was finishing college, that the people who worked at the bank didn't make enough money to support a family. So I wanted to get out of banking and get into investment or financial planning.
Okay.
And John Hancock, the insurance company, which most people around the rest of the world know it as Manulife, was starting a financial planning division. And I answered an ad for a job when I was 22, just out of college. And this old insurance agent says to me, he goes, so tell me why you would like to have a career selling life insurance. And I remember looking at him going, well, I have no intention of having a career selling life insurance. And he looked at me, he's like, well, why are you here? And I said, well, I thought you guys were starting a financial planning division. And I
Oh,
thought that if I could spend
funny.
my career helping clients solve their financial issues, that it would be rewarding for my clients and for me. And for some reason, they hired me. And that's how I started in the business.
That's a really good one. You said, like you said, you started in 1987 being a financial advisor. You later became the founding partner and launched Impel Wealth. What was the moment where you decided your career shifted from being performance based to purpose based?
Yeah. So when you think about it, the firm, it took me about 2.5 years of working at John Hancock to realize that I wanted to be in a more independent financial planning environment. So
Okay.
1990, I joined another financial planning firm. By the way, just real quickly, you might find this funny. So I started in August of 87. In
Mm.
October of 1987, we had the Black Friday, stock market crash of 87. So I had been in the business about 8 weeks when we went through the stock market crash of 87. And one of the things I always tell people is one of my claims to fame is that I was actually a financial advisor in 1987 and none of my clients lost any money because I was so new to the business that I really didn't have any clients yet. So,
That's a
so
good one.
yeah, right. So then, working in an independent firm from 1990 to 97, we developed a niche of doing retirement planning for corporate executives. We ended up getting hired by a number of different local corporations, Ohio
Okay.
Edison, Roadway Express, All Telephone Company, General Tire, and so forth. And we used to go in-house and we would teach retirement planning workshops over 4 weeks to their employees who were 50 and over. And over that time, you started realizing that really in the whole history of mankind, there's only three things you can do with money, right? You can save it, you can spend it, or you can give it away. And if you don't give it away while you're living, you'll give it away when you die because you can't take it with you. So we started realizing that people who didn't have a plan and didn't have the freedom to spend, right? If you think about your financial life, it kind of comes in two broad brushstrokes, right? The first is from the day you start working until the day you retire. We call that the accumulation phase of life, right? You're
Yes.
working, you're earning an income, you're saving, you're investing, you're putting money away in IRAs and your 401k plan, and hopefully you're paying down your mortgage and your debts and so forth. And over time, you build and accumulate wealth. Well, when you retire, you kind of cross this threshold where you go from the accumulation phase of life to the distribution phase of life, where you use the investment assets that you have to create the income you need. In addition, in the United States here, in addition to any pension and social security income that you have to live the life you want to live. Well, a lot of people struggle with that transition. And so we really started having a lot of purpose-driven conversations with clients about what are the things that are going to give you joy, meaning, and purpose for you personally and for your family, and how are we going to use these resources to accomplish those goals and objectives for you during your retirement years, right? Because there's only a certain window of time where
Yes.
you have the gift of health, the gift of time, and the gift of financial resources. And if you don't use them during that time, if any one of those things changes, and for most of our clients, unfortunately, it's health that drives a change, right? They have a medical condition come up, they have an accident or a diagnosis that causes life to change. And all of a sudden, now they may have been really successful in accumulating money, but if we didn't have a plan for what to do with it, it's sometimes, you just sit there and go back to that original couple. We did everything right, but it didn't make a difference for that couple.
So now, in your experience, how do you manage your clients' wealth right now? Do you let them know that, okay, they need to set aside some money for the health part of things, or do you just take on health insurance as a way to
Well,
manage
here in
that?
the United States, right? So for clients who are 65 and over, we
Mm.
have Medicare, and then there's Medicare supplement plans. Now, we don't do that, but we
Okay.
have other advisors that we refer them to work with that. And then
Mm.
we help them plan the cash flow and make sure they have the financial resources to cover that. Then you get into the bigger kind of like end of life care issues that are related to long-term care. What happens if somebody has a senile dementia or degenerative arthritis or Alzheimer's or something like that, and they
Yeah.
end up in an assisted living facility or a nursing care place, or so there are insurances that we can use to help cover that. Or if they have enough financial resources in the United States here, it's kind of um, like most places, right? If people are at the low end of the totem pole and
Mm.
financially, economically, income, resource wise, the government will take care of them if they're destitute. If you have more than enough in the way of resources, right? If you have $3, $4, $5 million of investment assets or more than that, then you can probably cover those expenses out of your own resources. It's the people in
Okay.
the middle who get hit really hard if they don't have
Mm.
insurance and they haven't planned for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I like one thing you usually says hope is not a strategy. So
Yeah.
in your opinion, what does real strategy look like for someone who feels like they're behind financially and doesn't know where to start? How would you help them move from that phase of fear to structured action?
Yeah. So I always use the analogy of like traveling through an airport, right? Like if
Mhm.
you have ever flown through a connecting flight to a big airport, right?
Yes, I
You're
have.
in London, right? So if you ever flew into the United States and you had to make a connecting flight through New York City, through LaGuardia or JFK or Atlanta or Charlotte, right? And you have to get from where you are to gate B37, right? The first thing most people look for the concourse map, right?
Mhm.
And once you find the map, the first thing you have to do is find the place that says you are here, because you have to know where you are in order to get to B37, right? So the first thing we tell people to do is we have to get a good inventory of where you are today and then start taking a look at where you want to go so we can start charting a path to get from where you are today to where you were. Even if you, and here's one of the things I think a lot of people struggle with is they say, okay, I'm 42 or I'm 45 and I haven't looked at this before. And they go, I
Yeah.
should have done this 10 years ago. Can't change it, right? We can't, you are where you are today. All we can do is take where you are and chart a path
Right.
forward. Nothing we do is going to change what happened 5, 7, 10 years ago. So getting people to kind of wrap their mind around that and get a good inventory of where they're at so we can start charting the right steps to take them forward is really the most important.
But people, there's a common saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So how do you bypass this already built mindsets, especially when these are the habits that made these mistakes to where they were at the point? So how do you help to break down the mindsets of your clients to make progress?
Yeah, I think part of it is just small steps, right? I don't know. Did you ever hear of or see a movie called What About Bob? I don't know if
No.
it was a Bill Murray movie. And it was about a guy who was a mental patient of a psychologist. And the psychologist, it's a comedy, but the psychologist wrote a book called Baby Steps, right? And it's
Okay.
like, here's where you want to go. Here's where you are today. We're not going to get from here to there tomorrow. We've got to take these little baby steps along the way and get you started on the path. And I think a lot of that applies to the financial planning process, right? If you can help people start having little wins, either pay down debt or save for more for retirement, or
Mm.
starting to utilize their company's employment benefits better or whatever, and they start seeing progress, they'll start going, oh, this really works. Now, what else do I need to do? What's the next step from there? And I think that's probably the most important.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you share a story of like a difficult client you had to work with that you basically lived this process? How were you able to manage the blocks? Because people, as humans, we typically have these blocks, and adults would be like, oh, you can't tell me what to do, or I'm already used to doing things this way. So can you share like a difficult story of a client that you were able to help to move along the way?
Yeah, I mean, so I work with about 140 client families. I manage about $350 million of investment assets for those clients. So I would say out of those 140 client families, I probably have 80 that have accumulated enough money, live comfortably, they live within their means. They don't have huge surplus, but they're fine, right? I
Okay.
probably have 65 of those clients that have way more than they need. They're very successful. They've accumulated money, and now we're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the extra. How are they going to use the extra to help and bless kids and kids charities, things they want to do in the community and so forth. I probably have 5, maybe less than that, who spend more than they should. And I worry that if they don't do things the right way, they'll run out of money before they run out of life, which is a terrible place to be, right?
Sure.
So I have a client who I love to death. She's one of my favorite people, but she had some pretty significant health issues. She's very good friends with my wife as well. And she had some pretty significant health issues. And as a result, she didn't think she was going to live very long. So she started spending money more aggressively than she should have, right? And I
Oh.
had some pretty difficult conversations with her about, like, Carol, we got to pump the brakes here. Um, because if you keep spending at this rate, she was 62, 63 years old.
Mm.
And she said to me, I said, if you keep spending at this rate, you're going to run out of money by the time you're 70 years old. Right. And she said to me, she goes, well, Jesse, I'll be dead by the time I'm 70. I'm like, Carol, what if you're not? And she goes, but I will be. I'm like, Carol, what if you're not? If you run out of money, you can't come live in my basement, right? Like, we've
Yeah.
got to take some serious steps here. And Carol just turned 70.
Wow.
And so there's times where you almost have to be parochial parent like putting down your foot and go, if you want to work with me, you are going to follow this advice. And if you choose not to follow this advice, you can take your money and go somewhere else. But I'm not going to stand on the deck of the Titanic and just rearrange chairs. I'm not going to do that.
I saw this post yesterday. The guy was giving financial advice, so to speak. So he said you don't have to be a millionaire to have a trust. It's not just for the wealthy people. You can just buy a life insurance and put it in a trust. Does that make any sense?
Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, like there are people, if you think about a lot of young people and the reason they buy insurance, if you think about Nathan, who works with me, Nathan's my right-hand person, who's another certified financial planner in our office. Nathan and his wife, Lauren, are 41 and 37 years old. They have 3 boys that are 8, 6, and 2 years old, or 8, 6, and 4 years old. They moved from a starter house to a bigger house. Like they have a need for a lot of life insurance today, because if something happened and Nathan got hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow, he'd want to make sure there's money to pay off the mortgage. He'd want to make sure there's money to provide for his wife. He'd want to make sure that there's money to pay for his 3 sons' college education. And so some people who haven't accumulated assets yet buy the insurance to create the assets so that if something happened with them, they would have the resources that they haven't accumulated during their lifetime.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do you manage your clients, especially in a world of social media, news, and contracting information? Because something might happen and everyone is scared. And how do you manage the tensions when it comes to their money and they following social media headlines?
Yeah, actually, the book that I wrote, Poponomics, right? I'll just plug it here,
Okay,
right? If you see the puzzle pieces here, the book is written as the 12 puzzle pieces you need to put together your retirement puzzle, right? And
okay.
solve for you. And everybody's is unique, different, and so forth, right? And chapter 5 of the book, puzzle piece 5 of the book, is called Navigating the Negative 24-Hour News and Social Media Cycle, right? Because it is. I'll give you a great example. This just happened maybe 2 weeks ago. I had a
Okay.
client who's 81 years old. He has been a client of mine since 1995. So he's been with me 30 years. He is a very smart, articulate, and well-read investor, probably better than most.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he said, Jesse, I want to move all of my money into money market and cash because I've been watching these videos on YouTube of Warren Buffett, who says a stock market crash is coming because of the AI stocks like the tech.com bubble did back in 2000.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm like, well, Denny, I said, pretty much anything Warren Buffett says or does is all over the news. I haven't seen anything, and I wouldn't suggest doing this. So he called me up 2 days later and said, I've watched 3 more of these videos and I want to move all of my money to cash. So I started doing some research on it. Nathan and I started doing some research, and there were a number of posts that had been put out by Warren Buffett that said there were deep fake AI generated Warren Buffett things that were giving people advice that wasn't Warren Buffett. And this very
Wow.
smart, very successful guy was ready to make all of this move with all of his money on something that wasn't even true. Right.
Wow.
So, I mean, this just happened 2 weeks ago. And so one of the things that I tell people, right, is if you look at the news in general, whether it's network news, cable news, social media outlets, whatever, right? The news tends to be 4 to 1, 5 to 1, negative to positive, because that's what draws people in, right? So I always tell people if Forbes magazine or Money magazine told you every month that the way to build wealth is to build a diversified portfolio, dollar cost average into it every paycheck into your 401k plan, pay down debt, and let that money grow and compound for retirement, you would have to buy Forbes or Money magazine exactly once, right? But they never put out headlines like that. The headlines are the 3 mistakes you have to avoid now, right? Or the 5 stocks you must own today, right?
Yeah.
And so So I try to get people to not get caught up in the negativity of the news and not responding to the news because, and I always tell people, right, you have to build a disciplined diversification in your portfolio. Building a diversified portfolio isn't hard. Staying disciplined with it and not responding emotionally to it, right? So not wanting to get into political stuff here, right? But
No
in
worries.
March, April of this year, we had in the United States all this trade tariff stuff that President Trump put out, and it caused the
Yeah.
stock market to drop from February 19th to April 8th. The stock market dropped 20% on an intraday basis. People on April 8th of this year were freaked out that a recession was coming, that the economy was going to stall, corporate earnings were going to fall, and that the stock market that was already down 20% was going to drop another 20 or 30%. And it was going to be like 07, 08 all over again. If you look at everything that has happened since April 8th to today, the stock market's up more than 20%, right? There's still been trade tariff uncertainty. There's still been uncertainty around the path of inflation and what the Federal Reserve Bank's going to do. There's still uncertainty about what the ultimate impact of tariffs might be on corporate earnings. There's still geopolitical tension in Russia and Ukraine. And even though things are more stable in the Middle East with Israel, Gaza, they're not completely resolved. Hey, remember, it was just June, just 4 or 5 months ago, that the United States decided to drop a few bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities. And if somebody told you there was going to be all that uncertainty and geopolitical unrest on April 8th, but don't worry, 6 months from now, the stock market's going to be up 20, 25%, you'll be fine. Nobody would have ever believed it because the media was screaming that the sky was falling, right? So we try to help people to stay disciplined with their diversification and not respond emotionally to what's going on at the moment.
That's really good. And talking about risks, I know that in both investments and entrepreneurship, you're faced with tough decisions and uncertainties. So, how do you personally evaluate risk when guiding clients through major financial or life decisions? And also maintaining the same peace within the team, because it's one thing to be is one thing to reassure your clients, and another thing to also give that same level of reassurance to your team. So how do you navigate on both sides? I like the way you sighed first, like you just like took a deep breath.
Well, I was trying to think, that was a lot of stuff to cover. So I'm trying to think which way I want to go here. Because
Yeah,
there's like
sure.
three different answers I could give you. But you look at it, and first of all, I've done this for 38 years, right? So I've lived through 2 Persian Gulf Wars, the stock market crash of 87. I've lived through the collapse of long-term capital management, which was a big hedge fund back in 1998 that collapsed, that the Federal Reserve Bank had to bail out. I've lived through the dot-com 9/11 bubble, the 07-08 financial crisis and subprime mortgage crisis, COVID, Russia invading Ukraine, all this stuff, right? And so I wrote a blog post a couple of months back. There's a rock group in the United States called REM. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. REM
Yeah.
wrote a song called "It's the End of the World as We Know It."
Okay.
And so I wrote a blog post that was titled "It's Not the End of the World as We Know It," right? Because all of these things have happened. I have a really great chart that came from Capital Group and the American funds, and it shows from 1987 through 2024, which is my entire career in the business. It
Yeah.
shows the 19 different financial, geopolitical, and healthcare crises that have occurred globally that have caused geopolitical markets, volatility. But during that time period, the market has still gone up. And so this is going to sound crazy, but in 1987, one of the first things I was taught was to talk to people about volatility and investments was to say that if you look at a long-term chart of the stock market, it's like watching somebody walking up a hill bouncing a yo-yo, right? You don't pay attention to the yo-yo, you pay attention to the hill because the hill, the climb is relatively steady. And if you look at that, that's what's happened over the last, since 1987, over the last 38, 39 years. You've seen innovation, technology, you've seen product innovation, you've seen corporate earnings rise far faster than inflation. Corporate earnings tend to drive stock prices. And so you just have to help people understand that, there is rational thought process behind not panicking and not doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? Go back to just earlier this year. If somebody had panicked on April 8th of this year and sold when the market was down 20%, not only would they have locked in those gains, they would have missed the rebound, right?
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we do, because again, most of what we do is help people plan to retire successfully, is as clients get closer to retirement. And I'll try to make this real quick, real simple. Let's say a client needs $100,000 a year to live on, and their pension and Social Security provide $60,000 a year. Then that means they need to take $40,000 a year out of their investment portfolio to make up the difference. So one of the things that we try to do as clients get closer to retirement is we use upticks in the market, upturns in the market you make money by buying low and selling high. We sell a little bit when the market's high, and we try to make sure that all of our clients have at least 2, preferably 3 years worth of money in things like money market, short-term bond, limited term bonds, things that don't fluctuate, so that when the markets go through, not if, when the markets go through their inevitable downturns, you don't have to panic. My clients, can I tell you a real quick story? This one's really funny.
Sure.
I had a client that had to take their first required minimum distribution from their retirement account in 2022. Now, you got to remember, in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. The Fed started raising interest rates dramatically because of inflation being so high. So the stock market dropped 26%. The bond market went down double digits. It was the worst year in the bond market in decades. And I had a client that called me in October. He was coming in to see me a few weeks later. And he said to me, he goes, Jesse, I know I'm coming in to see you in a few weeks, but I'm freaking out because I know I have to take this money out of my account and the stock market's down and the bond market's down. What do you think we should do? And I said to him, well, Dick, when the market was up last year, we sold enough when the market was high that we have enough money in your account to cover your distributions for 22, 23, and 24, whether the market goes up, down, or sideways. So we don't have to worry about things short term. So what I think you should do is turn off the TV and go play with your grandkids or go play some golf, right? And he looked at me and he goes, oh, that sounds like a great idea. But you just have to have strategy, and you have to be able to help clients manage those so they don't do the wrong thing at the wrong time.
It's really good. And I know you gave a shout out to Nathan at the start. So shout out to Nathan. And what's your take on how you pick and how you select your teams and the people that work with you? What are the key things you look out for people that needs to join your team?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And it's very relevant because we're actually hiring 2 new people over the next 30 days or so here. So I'm very blessed. Nathan's been with me almost 8 years. Karen and Sarah, who are my 2 lead client service people, have been with me for 18 and 14 years. And I want to hire good, smart people who are good at what they do, but I'm a big believer that you can teach a smart person how to do a job, right? But what you can't teach somebody is you can't teach somebody to be empathetic or caring or to be compassionate and so forth. So if you're in a service related industry where you're handling people's money and you're trying to serve them with excellence and dignity and respect, you have to hire for those qualities. And I can teach them the job, but I can't teach somebody who's not naturally caring or compassionate to be that way. So that's probably the number one thing. And it's we hear it from our clients all the time. They're like, you have an amazing staff, an amazing team. They're so nice. They're so caring. And it's like, yeah, I'm really blessed, but we really intentionally hire for that.
And I feel like it's easy to work with you because you have the charisma, you have the drive. So that's very infectious. People would pick up the traits easily and you'd have a great team regardless. And I know you've served on multiple boards and leadership councils and you support initiatives like the Diversitas. How has
Yeah.
community involvement shaped the way you build wealth with your clients?
Yeah. So there was a motivational speaker. I don't know whether you've ever heard of him. He passed away a number of years ago. His name was Zig Ziglar. He was very famous in
Okay.
the United
Yes,
States back in the
I've
80s
heard
and 90s.
I heard about him. Yes.
Yeah. Zig Ziglar one time said, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. Right. And it's just like help as many people as you can. And
Mm,
so it's a philosophy that we take into our client service, but it's also part of being good at what you do is being good community stewards and giving back. So over the last 30 years, I have served on 14 different community boards and for nonprofit organizations. I have been the president or chair of 9 of those boards, and I've served on the executive committee of every one. I actually just got asked yesterday to serve on my 15th one, which will probably be my last one. I'm trying to pass that mantle down to Nathan and Irene. And I said the 6 to 8 hours a week or 4 to 6 hours a week I spend volunteering, at some point
yeah.
I'd like to spend with my wife, and we're going to go do some other stuff. But,
Grandkids.
but, you know, giving back and being a good steward and blessing others with what you have been blessed with, I think is part of our responsibility. And some of that comes from helping people who are less privileged, right?
Mm,
I served on the
yeah.
board. I was president of the board of an organization called Open M, the letter M Ministries, which was a
Okay.
multi-church organization, multi-faith organization that provided food for people who were at risk who didn't have food. They provided free medical dental clinic, and they provided job training so that they could get back up on their feet and eventually be self-sufficient, right? So I've done things like that. I've served on boards where organizations that have helped at-risk youth with
Mm,
programming during after school or summer times to keep kids engaged in productive
okay.
things and keep them off the streets. But like Diversitas, you mentioned, Diversitas was a program that came out of the University of Akron's financial planning program. And it was really about trying to help recruit more female and people of color to our industry. I hope I can say this and it sounds interesting or funny, but like if you went to a conference 30 years ago in my industry, 90% plus of the people look like me. They were old white guys with no hair, right? So,
With no hair.
and there's been talk for 20, 25 years
Mm,
about bringing more diversity into our industry.
yeah.
And now with 20 years of effort, now we've gone to now if you go to a conference, now it's just 75% look like me and the other 25% are either female or people of color or both,
Nice.
right? But like there's still a ways to go in that process because you want to attract people to our industry that are going to look like the people they're going to serve, right?
Oh,
And so I felt like that was a way to help give back and help with the next generation.
that's nice. And talking about demographics, in your experience, what demographic of people do you see taking their finances seriously? Because I know there is this bias that say Black people, they don't necessarily talk about money as much as the white people. So is that really a thing, or it's just
I would
right?
say it probably has partially to do in the United States.
Mm,
I would say it partially has to do with the family you're raised in. Now, I wasn't
yeah.
raised in a family that taught anything about money, right? My mom handled the checkbook. Like I came from an old school family. My dad was an electrician. Every
Mm,
Friday when my dad got paid, he drove to the bank, he got cash, he gave my mom money to handle the groceries. He kept the rest of the cash to do whatever he wanted with. We never talked about money. We never talked about checking, savings, investments. My parents didn't have any investments. We were too poor. But I find that families who are intentional about giving their kids some understanding about budgeting, finance, savings, that type of thing tend to do better. But the other thing is in the United States, we do a lousy job of financial literacy for kids in school. We just don't teach kids the basics. So then you have kids coming out of high school or sometimes even college
yeah.
who who now are earning a paycheck and they don't have any idea what to do about their health insurance coverage, or should I save money in my 401k, or what do I do? Do I need a credit card, and how do I pay it off every month, and what's my FICO score? They just don't know because nobody actually teaches them that. And
Yes.
unfortunately in our industry tends to cater to older, wealthier people, right?
Yeah.
So if you went to any one of the big banks or any one of the big brokerage firms, the big national wirehouses, and you were 30 years old and you had $25,000 you wanted to invest, they wouldn't even talk to you. Right? Or not.
Yeah.
If they opened up an account for you, you would be relegated to an 800 number in a call center, and anytime you needed help, you'd call 1-800 dial a prayer, and whoever answers the
Going up
phone is
for
somebody you've never talked to and doesn't know who you are. We
yeah.
actually at our firm did something I think is really interesting, and this is something I did with Nathan. So like I said, Nathan's 41. When he joined me, he was 33, and he wanted to be able to help serve younger clients, right? Some of my clients' kids and grandkids, some of the younger people that he knew that were his contemporaries. So we actually built, and it's on our website, we actually built a program called Simplify Finance. And it's a next gen subscription-based financial planning program. So people pay either
Nice.
$50 a month or $75 a month, and they get 2 conversations a year with Nathan. We build a financial website for them so that it includes their checking account, their savings accounts, their student loan debts, their credit cards, their 401ks, their retirement accounts, whatever. We help them build their goals, and then we meet with them twice a year to help them stay on track so they can build good habits so that eventually down the road, when they change jobs and have a 401k rollover, or when they inherit money from parents or grandparents, they're prepared because we've helped them build good financial habits.
Oh, that's really good. And I know you mentioned earlier that you go to speak in schools and all that. So you're basically giving out that financial information and just giving back to society. What people don't typically learn in homes, you're bringing it to the schools, and that's very commendable.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Like
Yeah.
the kids need it so badly, and there's so much either bad information or misinformation out there, on websites and social media and stuff. And so people really need that kind of help.
One who is like trying to get their finances together. Maybe they've experienced a crazy financial drought season. Maybe they lost their jobs. They're just trying to pick up themselves. What's the one action you would advise them to take over the next 30 days to get back in track, get back into their financial window in track? What's your advice
Yeah.
for such people? Yeah.
I think the first thing goes back to that map analogy that I use, like
Yeah,
the concourse
there
map.
you
They
are.
got to figure out, do an inventory of where they are,
Mm.
because nobody can really help them until we have a good picture of where they are, right? We need that first. And I always tell people, then the next thing is starting to picture where they want to go. So, like on the book I showed you, that it's built like the 12 puzzle pieces. And one
Yes.
of that you need to build retirement success. And I ask people all the time, I said, if you're doing a puzzle, what's the first thing you have to do when you build a puzzle? And people are like, well, you got to turn over all the pieces, and you got to find all the edge pieces, or you got to find the 4 corner pieces, or whatever it is. And I said, actually, the first thing you need to do is look at the box. You need to know what the picture is, because you can't put it together until you know what it is you're trying to
My
solve
God,
for, right? So you need to know where you are, and you need to have a vision for where it is you want to go. Then you can start taking small steps to get there.
so the final question for this session, we're talking about legacy now. Looking ahead, how do you think the next generation will redefine wealth, work, and financial success in compared to previous generations? Because I know you made that contrast. In the past, we didn't necessarily have this financial education decentralized. We're just focused on the wealthy people. But today, with the next gen product rollout you're doing in your company, you're decentralizing that information to the younger ones. So how do you think the next generation will redefine wealth, work, and financial success compared to what the previous generation has done?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, deep question, and there's a lot of different ways you could go with it, right? So one of the things I keep reminding people is that, and this might sound a little out there, right? But in my
Okay.
world,
Yeah.
let's say since 1950s, for the last 75 years, the paradigm for what I do is that people start that accumulation phase of life when they get out of high school or college or get trained, and they work for 30, 35, 40 years to accumulate the resources to be able to be retired for whatever it is, 20, 25, 30 years, because currently life expectancies in the United States are somewhere around 80, 85 years old, depending on health and male, female, and all of that, right? So that paradigm has been like that for 75 years. There are some fascinating things going on with genomic sciences, with stem cell, with biomedical engineering, with AI assisted drug development. And there are a number of people I read, and I could share the resources with you if you'd like, that believe that healthy life expectancy, not just life expectancy, but healthy life expectancy for people. My kids are 34, 32, and 30. They believe that people that age could potentially see their life expectancy increase from 80, 85 to 110 to 120 years old. Now, that has all kinds of different implications, because then you sit there and go, if I live to 120 instead of 85, how long do I have to work and how much do I have to save to be able to be retired that long? And then
Yeah.
you sit there and go, what's the career track look like? And what will I be doing at age 72 that looks different than what I was doing when I was 25 years old? So there's all kinds of really interesting things, but I think part of what our job is as a financial planner, and this is going to be really incumbent on that next gen of advisors to do, is help people understand what the possibilities are. Because I think in general, people who are afraid of the future and can't picture themselves in that future tend to
Yeah.
make fear-based decisions, and they tend to make bad decisions. And so I think part of our job is to help people cast that vision for what life could be like 20, 30, 50 years down the road, and what do we need to get from point A to point B. And I think that's going to be how that next gen helps their peers build financial success.
Nice. I forgot to ask you the
That may
AI
be way
question.
more of a that may be way more of an answer than you wanted. Like
Yeah.
it's something I've given a lot of thought to.
Yeah, you definitely gave it a lot of, you did justice to the question. And one thing that comes to mind is, what about your take? What's your take on AI and how are you adopting it in the next gen, in your next gen finance consulting?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, because I literally wrote a blog post that went out to our clients this week that
Wow.
was titled "Will the AI monster eat our jobs?" Right, and the whole premise of the blog post was, every time there's been this advancement
Yeah.
in technology, right? And I mean, we're talking about when we went from horse and buggies to cars, right?
Yeah.
When personal computers came along, and when the internet came along, and when iPhones came along, right? Every time people thought that this new technology was going to destroy jobs, which it has, but it's also created way
New
more new
jobs.
jobs and new
Yeah.
opportunities than it destroyed. And you sit there and go, yeah, back in the 1850s, like 90% or 85% of the US population worked in agrarian farming type things. And all of those jobs are gone because they're all automated today. And there's like less than 2% of people in the United States who work farming. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean 80% of the people are unemployed. They're just employed in different
Working
things
elsewhere.
that people in the 1850s couldn't even imagine, right? So again, that's part of casting that vision towards helping people not be afraid of the future, and understand that, yeah, hey, look, if in 1900 I owned a horse stable livery and I made money by having horses take people around with carriage rides and stuff. Yeah, I lost my job when cars came along. And it was bad
Definitely.
if you did that. But for everybody else, it was great, and it created all
Yeah.
kinds of new opportunity.
Amazing. That's really fun. That brings us to the second part of the segment, which is the firecracker round. So this
Yeah.
is just me hitting you with a bunch of questions and you hitting me right back with first answers that comes to mind. So you ready to play the game? Drum
Yes,
roll.
ma'am. Lightning round.
So what's one money habit you think almost everyone should build, but most people ignore?
Okay, I think the most important thing is spend less than what you make,
Hmm.
right? Save and
I mean,
invest the difference. If
it's
you do
common
that
sense, right?
alone,
Yeah.
right? If you just do that alone, you'll be ahead of most people.
Nice. What's one belief about wealth you had early in your career that you completely disagree with now?
I think early in my career, I thought it was more about rate of return and accumulating as much as possible. Now
Mm.
I think it's much more about using what you've accumulated to do what's most important to you.
What's most important? That makes a lot of sense. It's more purpose driven than just like hitting the metrics. So if you had to teach one financial lesson using a song or a movie, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I think I already hit it with that blog post.
Yes.
It's not the end of the world as
Not
we know it,
anyway.
right? There's been all kinds of disruption over the last 40 years, economically, geopolitically, healthcare pandemics,
Technological.
and so forth, technological
Yeah.
disruption, and so forth. And things keep marching on, right? Like there's always new product innovation that drives new corporate opportunities, which drives corporate profits, which drives stock prices over time, right? So I think that's probably the thing to help people understand is as much as there's so much doom and gloom out there in cable news and social media and so forth, I would tell people that optimism is the only realism. Like be optimistic, you'll be a happier person and life will be more productive.
Yeah, because it's just a state of mind anyways. Early this year, I was scammed. I was scammed and I lost about 5,000 pounds and I was in a very down moment. But I was like, wait, it's not like I'm not going to eat tomorrow. I still have food in my fridge, innit? So why am I so stressed? I feel like, oh, I should have known better. I should have known better. But it didn't make any sense because I was just beating down myself and ruining my mood all along when I could have just. So the moment I stopped allowing that define me, my life became
Yeah.
better. I started my podcast and it's been uphill from there. So it's just basically a reframing of the mindset and always adopting a positive mindset regardless of whatever happens because positivity, it shows like people can drain off that positivity. If you bring negative energy, people see that negative energy and they're like, stay away from me. I don't want to contact
Oh,
that.
I was told when I was in 1987 when I first started in the business, I was in a
Mm,
large office. There were 35, 40 financial advisors in that office. And my sales manager, the manager of that office said to me, he said, "Stay away from the people who are hanging around the coffee pot and the water cooler, who are complaining about things, complaining about why things aren't working well and so forth." He said, "Find the 3 or 4 most successful people in the business and spend as much time as possible with those positive, upbeat people." He said,
yeah.
the negative people around the water cooler will bring you down to their level faster than you can bring them up.
Sure. So if
Yep.
there are 4 negative people and you're sticking around in that room, you just be the fifth one.
No thanks. Life's too short. There's way
Life's
more
too
fun
short.
things to do.
Lastly, I know you've had a lot of ins and outs, ups and downs. So can you share your best and worst investment moments?
Yeah, I would say they're not specific investments, but I would
Mm,
say the toughest things that I've watched with clients through the years
okay.
is I had 2 or 3 clients retire in either December of 99 or February, March of 2000, which was right at the peak of the dot-com bubble. And
Mm,
then over the next 2.5 years, their first couple years of retirement, the stock market dropped 45, 50%. and it really impacted them, right? And the same thing happened in '07, '08. I only had two at that point, but when AIG and Lehman Brothers failed and we went through the global financial crisis, I had a couple of clients who retired, and from October of '07 to March of '09, the stock market dropped 57%. Well, if you retire and your investment accounts go down dramatically right out of the chute, it's tough to recover from when you're withdrawing from them as well. So it taught me some really good lessons on the flip side about how to make sure as people approach those last 2-3 years of retirement to build that 2 or 3 years worth of cushion so that they don't have to be subject to short-term market volatility during their retirement years.
What about the best moments for you?
The best moments for me are, I call it the cumulative effect of years, right? When
Okay.
you watch people, I've had clients come to me and they've been with me 15, 20, 25 years, and they finally get to that point where they're retiring, right?
Mhm.
And they come to you and they go, thank you so much. This never would have happened. I never would have been able to get here if it wasn't for you, right? And while
Aw.
that sounds great, I always remind them that where you are today is probably half to 2/3 your habits, your savings, your behaviors, and maybe it's a third our advice, right? But it's just like a doctor, right? If a doctor gives you the best advice in the world, but you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and drink a 6-pack of beer and eat too much and don't exercise, you can't out-doctor those habits, right? It's the same thing financially. So, but when you get to the point where you have, so I had just before I jumped on this podcast, I have uh, the fourth and final sister who was just referred to me. Mom and
Oh,
dad became clients of mine in 1991, and mom's still living at 92, and her 4 daughters are now all clients of mine.
wow.
And I gave them a couple of Thanksgiving pies to take home with them. And, when the daughter said to me, she said, Mom said to give you a hug. 92-year-old mom. She said, Mom said to give you a hug because none of us would be where we are today if it wasn't for you. Right. And it's like, hey, that's a pretty cool world where you get to work with really nice people. You get to
Yes.
help them do what's important in life. You get
Mm-hmm.
paid pretty well to do it, and you love what you do. Like, that's pretty good life, right?
Yeah, that's really, really good life. So I know the Thanksgiving weekend is here. So how do you unwind and reset when you're not so busy?
There's not a lot of that, but like my wife, Rochelle, would tell you I don't sit still well. Somebody said
Exactly.
to me not long, yeah, somebody said to me not long ago, they said, hey, you're turning 60 years old. Uh, are you thinking about retiring? And then I said, Rochelle would probably like it if I worked 55 hours a week instead of 75 hours a week. But the thought of me being home, I would drive her crazy. I don't sit still well. But there are things that we love doing. Rochelle and I love to travel, right?
Okay.
Like I think I told you we were just in Central Europe for my 60th birthday, Budapest, Vienna, Prague, and so forth. We've been to Italy a number of times. We love to travel. Every place we travel, we take cooking classes together. We love to cook together. We love to entertain together. So anytime, like in a couple of weeks here coming up, we'll have my entire staff over and all of their spouses and stuff for Christmas. And Rochelle and I will cook for everybody and do that. So,
Wow.
between cooking, trying to work out and be physically fit and traveling, that's probably the extent of my unwinding and resetting.
What's your favorite thing to cook?
I love to cook anything Italian. I can,
Say.
we cook a lot of stuff, a lot of different things. When my wife grew up, part of her time in Arizona, and we were out in Arizona a week and a half ago, and we literally cooked a Friendsgiving dinner for a bunch of her junior high girlfriends and their husbands while we were out there. And I cooked fillets for everybody
Oh,
and
nice.
mushrooms and cream spinach and that kind of stuff. But if you gave me my choice, I'd take Italian food and Italian wine anytime.
Great. I know because of the Italian food and wine, people are trying to get through to you. They want to hunt you down so you can cook a good meal for them. So how can we reach you? Your website, socials?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so Impel, IM as in Mary, PEL, impelwealth.com is our website.
Yeah.
You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram. Facebook, Instagram is Jesse Hurst author. LinkedIn is just Jesse Hurst. And as a matter of fact, along those lines, I'll finish with this. So back in February of 2021, when
Yeah.
COVID hit, when COVID was still here and you couldn't get together face to face, we were used to, as a firm, doing a couple of client appreciation events a year where we'd have everybody get together and do something social. Well, you couldn't do that. So it's actually on our YouTube channel, on the Impel Wealth YouTube channel. If you go back to February of 21, Rochelle and I did a YouTube Italian cooking class for all of my clients, and we cooked 3 different types of pasta, made 2 different types of drinks, and hosted it together. My son and daughter-in-law videotaped it on Zoom and did monitored the Q&A. So that's out there. It's on our YouTube channel. So that was one where we tied Italian cooking to doing something social media wise for our clients.
That's really fun. That's really nice. And I'll make sure to leave the links in the description. I'll put everything there so people can jump right in and get you to you. But Jesse, it's been a privilege speaking with you today. Like, you just downloaded everything, all your years of experience over 3 decades. You just condensed it in an hour of mastermind. And
There you go.
I'm
So
really grateful.
I had to talk fast to do it, but that's okay. We had fun.
Yeah, we definitely have fun. Thank you so much for being on the pod today.
Thank you so much. I had a great time being here with you.
Amazing. There we have it, guys. Jesse has basically broken down everything that has to do with your financial management, and as well as how you find purpose while at it. So if you've watched this episode so far, don't forget to leave a like, leave a comment, and sign up to get Jesse's book. Jesse's book is out, Poponomics. So I'll make sure to leave the link as well so you can grab his book and also reach out to him. He cooks amazing Italian meals. That's a plus for you. So till we come your way again, let's continue to turn knowledge into action and bricks into banks. This has been Bricks and Banks with Steph, and this is me signing out.